The hospital smelled of antiseptic and regret. A sterile sting that clung to my skin as I lay on the gurney, waiting for the anesthesia to pull me under. My heart, the traitor, had been failing me for months. But it wasn't the surgery that twisted my gut. It was the text from my son, Ethan, that buzzed my phone just as the nurse adjusted my "Ma, rent's due tomorrow. You got the $1,200. I'm tight this month." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring, not from the drugs but from the weight of his words. Ethan, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone, was demanding money from me while I faced a scalpel. He didn't know I'd sold the house yesterday. He didn't know I'd burned the last bridge between us. I was 48, a widow who'd clawed through life to give Ethan everything. The house on Maple Street was my pride, a 3-bedroom relic of better days, filled with memories of my late husband, Tom, and the laughter we shared before cancer took him. Ethan grew up there, but he'd changed. At 25, he was a stranger, drifting through jobs, women, and schemes, always coming back to me for cash. "It's just temporary, Ma," he'd say, his boyish grin masking the lie. I believed him for years, pouring my savings into his emergencies, until the bank account ran dry and my heart started skipping beats. The cardiologist said stress was killing me. I didn't tell her it was my son. Selling the house wasn't impulsive. It was a calculated act, a severance of the cord I'd let strangle me. The buyer, a young couple with bright eyes and dreams of a nursery, offered cash, enough to cover my surgery and a small apartment. I signed the papers in secret, telling no one, not even Ethan. He'd been living in the basement, coming and going like a tenant, not a son. He didn't notice the realtor's visits or the boxes I'd packed in the attic. He didn't ask why I looked pale or why I winced when I climbed stairs. He just texted about rent, as if I were his landlord, not his mother. The anesthesiologist's voice broke through my thoughts. "Count backward from 10. Mrs. Harper." I closed my eyes, Ethan's text burning behind my lids. 10, 9, 8. I wondered if he'd care if I didn't wake up. 7, 6. I saw his face at 10, gap-toothed and beaming, when I taught him to ride a bike. 5, 4. The memory shifted to last month, when he'd yelled at me for not having cash for his car repair. 3, 2. I sold the house. Ethan, you're on your own. 1. Darkness. I woke to pain, a dull ache in my chest where they'd cracked me open to fix what was broken. The room was dim, the beep of monitors steady. My phone sat on the bedside table, blinking with notifications. Ethan again. "Ma, seriously, I need the money today. Where you at? No, how are you? No, I love you." Just demands. I didn't reply. My fingers trembled as I reached for the water cup, the 4 tugging at my skin. The nurse, a kind woman with tired eyes, checked my chart. "You're doing great, Ellen. Rest now." Rest. As if I could, knowing what I'd done. The house was gone, but the weight of it lingered. I'd raised Ethan there, cooked his favorite lasagna, bandaged his scraped knees. I'd also cried there, alone, when he started disappearing for days, when I found the drugs in his room, when he called me weak for grieving Tom too long. I'd loved him fiercely, but love hadn't been enough. Selling the house was my revenge. Not just on him but on the version of myself that kept enabling him. It was also my redemption. A chance to save myself before it was too late. I drifted in and out of sleep. The hospitals hum a strange lullaby. Each time I woke, I checked my phone, hoping for something different from Ethan. A question about my surgery. A hint of concern. Nothing. Just more texts. Angrier now. Ma. What the hell? You ghosting me. I need that cash. My chest ached. But it wasn't the stitches. It was the realization that he didn't know I was in the hospital. He didn't know because he hadn't asked. The doctor came by. A gray-haired man with a gentle voice. We repaired the valve. Ellen. You'll need to take it easy. But you're strong. Strong. I almost laughed. I'd been strong for Ethan's whole life, carrying him through his mistakes. But now I felt hollow. I thanked the doctor, my voice hoarse, and he left me with a pamphlet on recovery. I stared at it, but my mind was elsewhere. Ethan would find out soon. The new owners were moving in tomorrow. He'd come home to a locked door, a stranger's furniture. I pictured his confusion, his rage. Part of me wanted to be there to see it. Part of me dreaded it. I closed my eyes, trying to summon the strength for what came next. Selling the house wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Ethan would have to face himself, and I would have to face what I'd done. Justice, loyalty, redemption, they were tangled in my heart, each pulling me in a different direction. I loved my son, but I couldn't save him anymore. Not at the cost of myself. The phone buzzed again. I didn't look. I wasn't ready. Not yet. The hospital room felt smaller as the hours passed, the walls closing in like my thoughts. I'd been awake for a while, staring at the ceiling, counting the tiles to keep my mind from spiraling. Ethan's texts kept coming, each one sharper, more desperate. Ma, you're pissing me off. Answer me. I imagined him pacing the basement, his boots scuffing the floor I'd scrubbed 1,000 times. He didn't know the house wasn't ours anymore. He didn't know I'd cut him loose. The guilt gnawed at me, but so did the anger. I'd given him everything, and he'd taken it all without a backward glance. I thought about the day I decided to sell. It was a Tuesday, 3 weeks ago. Ethan had come home at dawn, reeking of whiskey and cigarettes, slamming doors like a teenager. I'd asked him where he'd been, and he'd snapped. None of your business. Ma, I'm not a kid. He was writhe wasn't a kid. But he wasn't a man either. Not in the way Tom had been. My husband had worked double shifts to buy that house, to give us a home. Ethan treated it like a crash pad, a place to sleep off his bad decisions. That morning, as he slept through his hangover, I called the realtor. I didn't cry until I hung up. The nurse came in, checking my vitals, her hands gentle but efficient. You've got a visitor, she said, and my stomach dropped. Ethan. Had he found out about the surgery? But it was my sister, Claire, who walked in, her face lined with worry. She was the only one I'd told about the house, the surgery, everything. She sat beside me, her hand warm on mine. How you holding up, Ellen? she asked, her voice soft but searching. I tried to smile, but it felt like a grimace. I'm alive, I said. She nodded, understanding more than I'd said. Claire had always been my anchor, the one who saw through Ethan's charm to the chaos beneath. She'd warned me years ago to stop bailing him out, but I hadn't listened. I thought love meant giving, always giving. Now, with the house gone, I wondered if I'd been wrong. He's been texting, I said, showing her the phone. Claire's lips tightened as she read. He's got no idea, does he? She said. I shook my head. He'll find out tomorrow. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the question she didn't ask. Are you sure about this? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. We talked for a while. About the surgery. About the new apartment I'd rented. About anything but Ethan. But he was there, in the silence between our words. Claire knew what selling the house meant. It wasn't just about money or survival. It was a line in the sand. A declaration that I wouldn't let him drag me down anymore. But it was also a betrayal. One that would shatter whatever was left of our bond. I'd raised him to be better. To be like Tom. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost him. Or maybe he'd lost himself. Claire left when the nurse returned, promising to check on me tomorrow. I was alone again. The phone silent now. I pictured Ethan coming home, finding the new owners unpacking. Would he call me, screaming? Would he show up here, demanding answers? The thought made my chest ache, the stitches pulling tight. I'd done this to protect myself, but it felt like revenge, cold and sharp. I wanted him to hurt, to feel the weight of his choices, but I also wanted him to change, to find the boy I'd loved. I drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of the house. In the dream, it was empty, the walls bare, the rooms echoing with laughter that wasn't there anymore. I saw Ethan as a child, running through the backyard, chasing fireflies. Then he was older, his face hard, his eyes cold, demanding money I didn't have. I woke with a start, my heart racing, the monitor beeping faster. The nurse rushed in, adjusting something, telling me to breathe. I did, but it didn't help. The pain wasn't in my chest. It was deeper, where no surgery could reach. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over Ethan's name. I wanted to tell him everything about the house, the surgery, the years of hurt. But I didn't. Instead, I typed a single word, tomorrow. I hit send before I could change my mind. Let him wonder. Let him wait. I'd spent years waiting for him to come back to me, to be the son I remembered. Now it was his turn. The night stretched on, the hospital quiet except for the hum of machines. I thought about justice, about what it meant to make things right. Selling the house wasn't just about punishing Ethan. It was about reclaiming my life, about choosing myself for once. But it didn't feel like victory. Felt like loss, like I'd traded one kind of pain for another. I closed my eyes, trying to picture the Futuria small apartment. A new start. But all I could see was Ethan's face when he learned the truth. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. Morning came too soon. The hospital window letting in a gray light that matched my mood. The pain in my chest was duller now, but my heart still felt heavy. weighed down by the choice I'd made. My phone was silent. Ethan's text stopping after my cryptic tomorrow. I wondered what he was doing, if he was still in the basement, oblivious to the upheaval waiting for him. Part of me wanted to call him, to warn him, but I didn't. He'd find out soon enough. The new owners, the Wilsons, were moving in today. I pictured their moving truck pulling up, their kids running through the yard. I wondered if Ethan would be there when they arrived. The nurse brought me breakfast, a tray of bland oatmeal and juice. I pushed it around, my appetite gone. Claire texted, asking if I needed anything. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to talk, not even to her. My mind kept circling back to Ethan, to the years I'd spent trying to fix him. I'd paid for his rehab, twice, when he was 19. I'd bailed him out of jail after a bar fight. I'd given him money for business ideas that never materialized. Each time, I thought it would be the last, that he'd turn a corner. But he never did, and I kept paying the price. I thought about Tom, how he'd believed in Ethan until the end. When Tom got sick, Ethan was 16, still a good kid, helping with chores, sitting by his dad's bedside. After Tom died, something in Ethan broke. He started staying out late, skipping school, fighting with me. I told myself it was grief, that he'd come back to me. But he didn't. By the time he was 20, he was a stranger, living in my house but not in my life. I kept the house for him, hoping it would anchor him. Instead, it became a cage for both of us. The doctor came by, checking my chart, telling me I'd be discharged in a couple of days if I kept improving. I nodded, barely listening. My thoughts were on Maple Street, on the moment Ethan would walk into the house and find it wasn't his anymore. I imagined his shock, his anger, the way he'd probably curse my name. I deserved it, maybe, but so did he. Selling the house wasn't just about money. It was about breaking the cycle, forcing him to face the world without me as his safety net. It was cruel, but it was necessary. Or so I told myself. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old photos. There was one of Ethan at 8, holding a fishing rod, grinning beside Tom at the lake. Another from his high school graduation, his cap tilted, his smile forced. I stopped at a recent one, taken last Christmas. He was slouched on the couch, staring at his phone, while I set the table. I cooked his favorite meal, hoping for a moment of connection. He'd eaten in silence, then left without a word. I deleted the photo, my fingers shaking. I didn't want to remember that Ethan. I wanted the boy with the fishing rod. The hospital day dragged on, a blur of nurses and tests. I kept checking my phone, expecting Ethan to call, to demand answers about my text. Nothing. Maybe he was sleeping off another late night. Maybe he was with that girl, the one with the dyed hair and the loud laugh, who'd been coming around. I didn't know her name. I didn't know much about Ethan's life anymore. That hurt more than the surgery, more than the betrayal I'd planned. By afternoon, I couldn't stand the waiting. I called the realtor, my voice low so the nurse wouldn't hear. "Are they there yet?" I asked. She hesitated. "The Wilsons." "Yeah. They started moving in an hour ago." No sign of your son, though. I thanked her and hung up, my heart pounding. He wasn't there. Where was he? The basement was his world. His mess of clothes and empty beer cans. Had he gone out, expecting to come back to the same old routine? I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and sudden. What if he was in trouble? What if he needed me? I pushed the thought away. Ethan was 25. He wasn't my responsibility anymore. But the guilt lingered, mixing with the anger, the hurt. I'd sold the house to save myself, but also to wake him up. I wanted him to feel the ground shift beneath him, to realize he couldn't keep taking. But what if he didn't learn? What if this pushed him further away, into the darkness I'd spent years trying to pull him out of? I closed my eyes, the weight of it all pressing down. Justice was supposed to feel good. So why did it hurt so much? The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a constant hum that matched the unease in my chest. I'd been staring at my phone for hours, waiting for Ethan to call, to text, to do something. The realtor's words echoed in my mind. No sign of him. Where was he? The house wasn't his anymore, but he didn't know that yet. I pictured him walking up the driveway, his key useless in the new locks, the Wilson's kids playing in the yard where he used to build forts. Would he knock on the door, confused? Or would he storm off, cursing me? I didn't know which I feared more. I tried to distract myself with the TV, flipping through channels of game shows and soap operas. But my thoughts kept drifting to the past, to the moments I'd clung to when Ethan was still mine. I remembered his 5th birthday, how he'd smeared cake on his face and laughed until he couldn't breathe. I remembered the night he came home crying because a kid at school called him poor, and I'd held him, promising we'd always have each other. I kept that promise. But he didn't. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being my son and become a weight I couldn't carry anymore. The nurse came in, checking my for. Her smile practiced but kind. "You're looking better," she said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Better was relative. My heart was fixed, but my soul was fractured. Selling the house was supposed to free me, but it felt like a chain tightening around my neck. I'd wanted Ethan to learn, to grow. But what if I'd pushed him too far? What if this was the final straw? The thing that broke him for good? I pushed the thought away, focusing on the nurse's chatter about my recovery plan. By evening, my phone finally buzzed. Ethan. My heart leapt, then sank as I read his text. "Ma, where's my stuff? Some people are in the house. What's going on?" I stared at the words, my hands shaking. He'd found out. Not from me, but from the Wilsons, from the reality I'd set in motion. I typed a response, then deleted it. What could I say? "I sold the house because you broke my heart. I'm in the hospital because you never asked how I was." I settled on, "I'm at Street Mary's. Come see me." I hit send, my chest tight, not from the surgery but from the fear of what came next. He didn't reply. The silence stretched, each minute heavier than the last. I imagined him standing in the driveway, staring at the house that wasn't ours anymore. Did he feel betrayed? Angry? Lost? I wanted to believe he'd come to the hospital, that he'd sit by my bed and ask why. But I knew Ethan. He'd always run from consequences. From me. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the guilt. This was justice. I told myself. He'd taken and taken. And now he had to face the world without my safety net. But the word justice tasted bitter. Like medicine I wasn't sure I could swallow. Claire called, her voice tense. Ellen. Ethan just called me. Freaking out. He said the house is gone. His stuff's on the lawn. What do I tell him? I swallowed hard. My throat dry. Tell him to come here. I said. I'll explain everything. She paused. Then said. Are you sure you're ready for this? I wasn't. But I lied. Yeah. I'm ready. She hung up. And I stared at the ceiling, counting tiles again. 1, 2, 3. I wasn't ready. Not for his anger. Not for his pain. But I'd made my choice. The night deepened. The hospital quiet except for the occasional footsteps in the hall. I kept my phone close, checking it every few minutes. Nothing. I wondered if Ethan was with that girl. Or at a bar. Drowning his confusion in cheap beer. I wondered if he'd read my text. If he cared that I was in the hospital. The old me would have called him. Begged him to come. Promised to fix everything. But the old me was gone. Buried under years of disappointment. The new me had sold the house. Had chosen herself. And yet, I couldn't stop hoping he'd show up. I drifted into a fitful sleep, dreaming of the house again. This time, Ethan was there, standing in the doorway, his face a mix of the boy I loved and the man I didn't know. He didn't speak, just looked at me, his eyes asking why. I woke with a start. My heart monitor beeping. The nurse rushed in. Her face calm but firm. You need to rest, Ellen. No stress. I nodded. But rest was impossible. Ethan was out there. And I'd turned his world upside down. Now I had to face him. Or lose him forever. The hospital felt like a purgatory. A place where time stretched thin and every thought was a reckoning. I'd sent Ethan the text telling him to come to Street Mary's. But hours had passed with no reply. No sign of him. My chest ached. Not just from the surgery but from the weight of waiting. I kept picturing him at the house. His belongings scattered on the lawn. The Wilsons watching from the window. Did he yell? Did he cry? Or did he just walk away? Like he always did when things got hard. I didn't know. And the not knowing was worse than anything. I tried to focus on the present. On the small victories of my recovery. The nurse had me walk a few steps down the hall. My legs shaky but holding. You're doing great, she said. Her smile encouraging. I didn't feel great. I felt like a traitor. A mother who'd abandoned her son. Selling the house was supposed to be my liberation. My way of breaking free from Ethan's endless demands. But now, with him out there, lost in the consequences of my choice, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Was this revenge? Or was it survival? The line between the two blurred in my mind. Claire came by again, her face drawn with worry. She sat beside me, her purse clutched tight, like she was bracing for bad news. He called me again, she said. He's at a friend's place. Some guy named Jake. He's angry, Ellen. Really angry. I nodded. my throat tight. Did he say anything about coming here? I asked. She shook her head. He just kept asking why you did it. Why you didn't tell him. I looked away, the guilt clawing at me. I hadn't told him because I couldn't face his reaction. Couldn't face the truth of what I'd done. We sat in silence for a while, the hospital's hum filling the space between us. Claire reached for my hand, her grip firm. You did what you had to do, she said, but her voice wavered, like she wasn't sure. I wanted to believe her, but the doubt was relentless. I'd sold the house to save myself, but also to punish Ethan, to make him feel the weight of his choices. It was a cold kind of justice, one that left me hollow. I wanted him to change, to be the son I remembered. But what if this pushed him further into the dark? What if I'd lost him for good? The day dragged on, each hour heavier than the last. I kept my phone close, checking it obsessively. Nothing. I imagined Ethan at this Jake's place, ranting about me, his mother who'd betrayed him. I wondered what he'd told his friend, if he'd painted me as the villain. Maybe I was. But I hadn't started this. He had, with years of taking, of breaking promises, of leaving me to pick up the pieces. I'd loved him through it all. But love wasn't enough anymore. By evening, the nurse helped me back to bed, my body exhausted from the short walk. She adjusted my pillows, her hands gentle. You need to rest, she said, her eyes kind but firm. I nodded, but rest was a fantasy. My mind was a storm, churning with images of Ethan, of the house, of the life we'd lost. I closed my eyes, trying to summon a memory of him that didn't hurt. I saw him at 12, helping me plant tulips in the garden, his hands covered in dirt, his laugh bright. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as a bank, not a mother. The phone buzzed, and I grabbed it, my heart racing. It was Ethan. I'm coming to the hospital. We need to talk. My breath caught, a mix of relief and dread. He was coming. After everything, he was coming. I typed a quick reply. I'm in room 312. I'll be here. I hit send, my hands trembling. The wait was over. But the real test was just beginning. I'd have to face him, to explain why I'd sold the house, why I'd cut him off. I'd have to face the truth of what we'd become. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, counting the tiles again. 1, 2, 3. Each number was a second closer to Ethan's arrival, to the confrontation I'd both dreaded and craved. I wanted him to understand, to see the pain he'd caused. But I also wanted him to forgive me, to see that I'd done this out of love, not just anger. I wanted redemption, for both of us. But as the minutes ticked by, I wasn't sure if redemption was possible, or if we were too far gone. The hospital room felt colder as I waited for Ethan, the anticipation twisting my insides tighter than the stitches in my chest. His text, "I'm coming to the hospital. We need to talk," hung in my mind like a storm cloud, heavy with unspoken accusations. I didn't know what to expect. Would he yell? Cry? Or would he just stare at me, his eyes full of the betrayal I'd planted? I'd spent years shielding him from consequences, but now I'd thrown him into the deep end. The house was gone, his safety net shredded. And I was the one who'd done it. I tried to prepare myself, rehearsing what I'd say. I'd tell him about the surgery, about the years of stress that had broken my heart, about the money I didn't have because I'd spent it all on him. I'd tell him I sold the house to survive, to start over. But the words felt hollow, like they couldn't capture the truth. The truth was messier, uglier. I'd sold the house because I was angry, because I wanted him to hurt like I'd hurt. I wanted justice. But now, waiting for him, I wasn't sure what justice looked like. The nurse came in, checking my chart. Her presence a brief distraction. "You've got a visitor soon?" she asked, noticing my fidgeting. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She gave me a reassuring smile. "It'll be okay. Family's always complicated." I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a sigh. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. Ethan wasn't just my son. He was my failure, my regret, my reason for fighting. And now he was coming to confront the mother who'd pulled the rug out from under him. I checked my phone again, hoping for another text, something to gauge his mood. Nothing. The silence was worse than his anger. I imagined him driving to the hospital, his hands gripping the wheel, his jaw tight. Did he know about the surgery? Had Claire told him? Or was he too caught up in his own shock to care? I hated how much I cared, how much I still wanted him to be the boy who'd run to me when he was scared. That boy was gone, but I kept looking for him in the man he'd become. The door opened, and my heart stopped. It was Ethan. He stood in the doorway, his frame filling the space, his face shadowed by the cap he always wore. His eyes were hard, but there was something else there, confusion, maybe hurt. He didn't move, just stared at me, the hospital bed a barrier between us. "Ma," he said, his voice low, rough. "What the hell did you do?" I swallowed, my mouth dry. This was it. The moment I'd both dreaded and needed. I gestured to the chair beside me. "Sit down, Ethan. We need to talk." He didn't sit. He stepped closer, his hands clenched, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for answers in the walls. "You sold the house," he said. Not a question but an accusation. "My stuff's on the damn lawn. You didn't even tell me." His voice cracked, and I saw the boy in him, the one who'd cried when his bike broke. But then his face hardened again. "Why, Ma? Why would you do that to me?" I took a breath, the pain in my chest sharpening. "Because I had to," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I'm in here because my heart gave out, Ethan. Because I couldn't keep carrying you." He flinched, like I'd slapped him. "What's that supposed to mean? You're blaming me for this?" He gestured at the hospital bed, at the monitors beeping softly. I shook my head, but the words stuck in my throat. "Yes." I wanted to say. "Yes. You broke me." But I didn't. Instead, I said, "I sold the house to pay for this surgery, to start over. I couldn't keep giving you money I didn't have." His eyes narrowed, and I saw the anger flare. "So you just kicked me out? Without a word? That's cold, Ma. Even for you." The words cut deeper than I expected. "Even for you." as if I were the villain, not the mother who'd sacrificed everything. I wanted to scream, to tell him about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the bills I'd paid, the dreams I'd buried for him. But I didn't. I looked at him, at the man who was still my son, and I saw the truth. He didn't know me. Not really. And I didn't know him. "I'm sorry," I said, the words heavy. "But you left me no choice." He laughed, a bitter sound. "No choice. You had a choice, Ma. You chose to screw me over." He turned to leave, and my heart lurched. "Ethan." "Wait," I called. But he was already gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Ethan's departure left the room emptier than before, the silence louder than the monitor's steady beep. I stared at the door, willing him to come back, to give me a chance to explain. But he was gone, his anger lingering like a bruise. I'd wanted him to understand, to see why I'd sold the house. But all he saw was betrayal. Maybe that's all there was. I told myself this was about survival, about breaking free. But his words, "You chose to screw me over," echoed in my mind, cutting deeper than the surgeon's knife. I lay back, my chest aching, my thoughts a tangle of guilt and defiance. I'd done this for me, for the first time in years. But at what cost? Ethan was out there, homeless, angry, and I was here, alone in a hospital bed. Justice was supposed to feel right, but this felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the image of him walking away, his shoulders hunched, his cap low. I wanted to believe he'd come back, that we could fix this. But hope was a fragile thing, and I'd broken too many fragile things already. The nurse came in, her face concerned. "Everything okay, Ellen? Your heart rate's up." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just family stuff," I said, my voice hoarse. She didn't press, just adjusted my fore and left me with a quiet, "Try to rest." Rest. As if I could rest with Ethan's words burning in my mind. I'd wanted him to feel the weight of his choices, but now I felt the weight of mine. Selling the house was my revenge, my way of saying enough. But it was also my failure, proof I couldn't save him, couldn't save us. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over his number. I wanted to call, to beg him to come back, to listen. But I didn't. He needed to face this, to stand on his own. And I needed to let him. I'd spent years catching him when he fell, but each catch had cost me a piece of myself. The surgery had fixed my heart, but it couldn't fix the ache of losing my son. I set the phone down, my hands shaking, and let the tears come. They were hot, silent, a release I hadn't allowed myself in years. Claire called later, her voice urgent. "Ellen, I saw Ethan. He's a mess. Staying with that Jake guy. He's talking crazy, saying he'll make you pay." My stomach twisted. Make me pay? How? I'd already given him everything, me money, my home, my health. What more could he take? Did he say anything about the hospital? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Claire hesitated. "He knows you're there. He's just angry. Give him time." Time. I'd given him 25 years. How much more did he need? The night settled over the hospital, the lights dimming in the halls. I lay awake, my mind replaying our confrontation. His eyes, so like Tom's, but harder, colder. His voice, accusing me of betrayal. I wanted to believe there was still good in him, still a chance for redemption. But what if there wasn't? What if this was the end? Not just of the house but of us. I thought about the new apartment, the fresh start I'd planned. It felt like a dream that belonged to someone else. Someone who wasn't carrying this guilt, this love, this pain. I drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of the house again. This time, Ethan was there, not as a boy or a man, but as a shadow, standing in the doorway, watching me. I tried to reach him, but he kept slipping away, his face fading into the dark. I woke with a gasp, the monitor beeping wildly. The nurse rushed in, her hands steady as she calmed the machine. "You're okay, Ellen," she said. "Just a bad dream." But it wasn't just a dream. It was my life, my choices, my son. Morning came, gray and heavy, like my heart. I checked my phone, hoping for a message from Ethan. An apology, a question, anything. Nothing. I pictured him at Jake's, plotting his revenge. Or maybe just drinking, numbing the pain I'd caused. I wanted to believe he'd come back, that we could find a way forward. But as I lay there, the stitches in my chest a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. I knew the truth. Redemption wasn't guaranteed. Not for him. Not for me. We'd both have to fight for it. And I wasn't sure either of us had the strength. The hospital discharged me 2 days later. My body stronger but my heart still fragile. Claire drove me to my new apartment. A small one-bedroom on the edge of town, far from Maple Street. The place was bare. Just a bed, a table, and a few boxes I hadn't unpacked. It was a fresh start, but it felt like exile. Ethan hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't come back. Claire said he was still with Jake, spiraling, blaming me for everything. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't. I'd made my choice, and now I had to live with it. I spent the first day unpacking, my movements slow, careful, as the doctor had warned. Each box held pieces of the past Tom's old watch, Ethan's childhood drawings, photos of us as a family. I lingered over a picture of Ethan at 10, his smile wide, his eyes bright. I wondered where that boy had gone, if he was still in there, buried under the anger and mistakes. I set the photo on the table, a reminder of what I'd lost, and what I still hoped to find. By evening, I was exhausted, my chest aching from more than the surgery. I sat on the bed, staring at my phone, willing it to buzz. Nothing. I thought about calling Ethan. But what would I say? I was sorry. But I wasn't. I loved him. But I couldn't keep saving him. Selling the house had been my act of defiance, my claim to a life that was mine. But it had also been my confession, proof that I'd failed as a mother, that I couldn't fix him. Claire came by the next day, bringing coffee and her quiet strength. "You need to focus on you now," she said, her voice firm. "Ethan will figure it out. Or he won't. But you can't carry him anymore." I nodded. But her words didn't ease the ache. I wanted to believe he'd find his way, that this would be the shock he needed to change. But I also knew the odds. I'd seen the drugs, the fights, the empty promises. I'd seen the boy I loved become a man I feared. That night, I wrote him a letter, not to send but to unburden myself. I poured out everything, the pain of his demands, the weight of my sacrifices, the love that never wavered. I wrote about the house, how it had been my anchor, my prison, and how letting it go was both my revenge and my redemption. I wrote about the surgery, about the fear that I wouldn't wake up, about the hope that he'd find his way back to me. When I finished, the pages were damp with tears, but I felt lighter, like I'd released something I'd carried too long. Days turned into weeks, and still no word from Ethan. I settled into the apartment. My routine simple doctor's visits, walks in the park, quiet evenings with books I hadn't read in years. I was healing, slowly, but the hole where Ethan should have been didn't close. I checked my phone less, but I never stopped hoping. Claire kept tabs on him through mutual friends, reporting that he was working odd jobs, staying clean, maybe starting to pull himself together. I wanted to believe it, but I'd believed too many times before. Then, one morning, a knock at the door. I opened it to find Ethan, his cap in his hands, his eyes tired but clear. He looked thinner, older, like the weight of the world had finally settled on him. "Ma," he said, his voice soft, uncertain. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, my heart pounding, and let him in. He sat at the table, his gaze falling on the photo of him at 10. He smiled, faint but real, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I'd loved. We talked for hours, not just about the house but about everything, Tom. The years of grief, the mistakes we'd both made. He told me about Jake, about the nights he'd spent hating me, about the moment he realized he'd lost more than a house. He didn't apologize, not directly, but his presence was enough. I didn't apologize either, but I told him I loved him, always had, always would. We didn't fix everything that day, but we started. Redemption wasn't a moment. It was a process, one we'd have to work for, together. As he left, promising to call, I stood in the doorway, watching him walk away. The apartment felt less empty, the future less heavy. I'd sold the house to save myself, but maybe, just maybe, it had saved him too. Justice, loyalty, redemption, they weren't answers. They were questions. Ones we'd spend the rest of our lives answering. But for the first time in years, I believed we could.